Thank you. I'd like to thank Mrs. LaRouche for her invitation. And it's been very interesting to listen to the interventions since this morning. All of them very, very, very highly interesting. I'm afraid I won't be quite as funny as my predecessor, but I do think I have serious things to tell you, which are part of which fit into the contents of this colloquium. I prepared my intervention basing myself on the speech on the 24th of September 2013 of the newly elected Iranian President Hassan Rouhani in front of the United Nations General Assembly. And I think he had some crucial things to say on how to improve relations among nations of the world. He called for moderation in the demands made by states and suggested to do away with the expression, the military option is on the table, and to replace it by the attitude, peace is always possible. And he proposed the following formula, the world against, and he proposed this to the United Nations Secretary General and to the General Assembly, the world against violence and extremism. The world, he said, is not the result of a balance between two blocks, nor is it dominated by one single power. It's multipolar, and all states whose power comes out of the ballot box are entitled to the same respect of their specific characteristics and their legitimate interest. No culture is superior to the others, and none should seek to impose itself. Ce programme, this common sense program, is apparently not applied today, since ongoing conflicts have broken out everywhere, especially in the Mediterranean. And it has, for example, in the Middle East, it's led to horrendous dramas committed by fanatics, fueled by the major powers, which attempt to reach their strategic objectives by maintaining regional crisis, since nuclear weapons prevent direct confrontations. That is the case of the combat now waged by the Islamic State. The United States has built an international coalition against the IS, whereas we know that the United States and their Arab and Turkish allies are responsible for creating that particular breed of Islamic terrorist. While airstrikes may be useful in defeating the IS, all military experts know that only troops on the ground will be able to eradicate the extremists, who are well-trained and armed, thanks to the complicity they were afforded, in particular from Western intelligence services. Those troops cannot come only from the countries where the extremists are operating and which urgently need to be supported, the governments of those countries where the terrorists are operating. Since the creature has escaped from its creator, we could say, the coalition now says that is what it intends to do. And let's hope it does. But as President Bashar al-Assad said during a recent meeting with a high-ranking Iranian official, the states which created terrorism are not the best ones to fight it. We have seen Turkey's reticence, for example, to join the coalition because it considers beneficial the IS conquest against the Kurds. The ad hoc alliances which IS has struck with the Baathists and with Saddam's former military men who went into the resistance when the Americans invaded in 2003, and the alliances with the Sunni tribes who are dissatisfied with their fate in al-Maliki's Iraq will be undone as soon as the interests of all the elements of Iraqi society are recognized by the government. It seems that the new Prime Minister, Haidar al-Abadi, is attempting to forge a national consensus around that objective and is considering giving important positions to certain Baathists and to other minorities which are part of the Iraqi mosaic. As President Putin said in Munich in 2007 at an international conference, in a democracy, the legitimate claims of minorities are not negated, they are taken into account by an enlightened majority. But once Iraq and Syria, as we hope, are rid of this scourge, what will happen to all those lost fighters who were enlisted with massive propaganda and dollars? They will spread out to countries where they will attempt to pursue their deadly deeds. Some will go to Central Asian countries, such as Afghanistan, and others will go back to their native countries to carry out terrorist attacks, like the thousands who have come from European countries, and more particularly from France. Now, in that respect, Syria, which has been under assault from these barbarian hordes for more than 3.5 years, must be assisted in its fight. And rather than advocating this absurd support for moderate Islamists who are non-existent on the ground and whom we're trying to train in camps in Jordan and elsewhere. And now I'm talking about Syria and its intelligence services. We should recognize that their knowledge of Islamist movements is indispensable for us, and we must at long last establish genuine cooperation with them.
Toujours porteur de mensonges avec le régime précédent.
We should stop talking about a dictatorship and untruthfully equating the current regime with the previous regime, which did have the immense advantage of stopping the Islamists. By the way, all other countries at the time talked to that regime, contrary to today. The constitution voted up in the middle of the crisis in 2012 by the Syrians is totally democratic. It preserves fundamental freedoms, and the government, while fighting the jihadist fanatics, is trying to reconcile all moderate tendencies in the nation, and successfully so, since many opposition forces now support the legal government, knowing that it is the last bastion against the terrorists. Moreover, striking alliances with countries with terribly backward political and religious traditions, such as Saudi Arabia and Qatar, where the ballot box is unknown, in order to promote democracy in the world, is another one of today's paradoxes, which is frankly absurd. We should really follow the wise precepts indicated by President Rouhani at the United Nations to build a more reasonable world in which the powers will settle their conflicts of interest through dialogue and moderate demands rather than by war. The future of humanity is at stake because men now wield a power which allows them to blow up our planet in a fit of madness. Deterrence has worked until now and has saved us from a cataclysm. The balance of terror has so far stopped those who might have wanted to destroy their enemy by launching a nuclear salvo, because they knew that they would also be annihilated in automatic retaliatory strikes. But we understand that certain war hawks would like to persuade us that the United States has an anti-missile shield to protect it from nuclear second strikes, and which is absolutely impermeable, which means the United States would have total military supremacy and the concept of deterrence would no longer exist. But that is obviously not true, since no shield or iron dome is entirely impermeable, and none will be in the middle term. But that does promote the idea that the United States are totally protected and will be able to launch a first nuclear strike. But that is simply not true. The peoples of the world, whatever their economic and cultural wealth may be, must be equal before the law. No culture can claim to be preeminent and believe it is the beacon of the world. The liberty whose statue lights up the world at the entrance to the Hudson Bay belongs to all nations, and none may claim in that respect to be superior, even if it does momentarily enjoy economic and military superiority over the others. France, my country, would do well to remember her intellectual heritage of the Enlightenment and the level of worldwide prestige which General de Gaulle brought her to by refusing to align France with any bloc at a time when it was much more difficult to leave NATO than now, and by defending the right of all peoples to decide their own destiny and advocating understanding among all the nations of the globe in the many trips that he made around the world. He was welcomed because he knew the various cultures, and he proposed everywhere he went, in Asia, Africa, Latin America, to respect all men and women with their differences. That is also what guided his wish to build a Europe of nations that would preserve their specific characteristics and their sovereignty. That Europe, in his view, was supposed to open up to wide-ranging cooperation with Russia and beyond. For us Frenchmen, who have the second exclusive economic zone, thanks to our overseas territories on all 5 continents, everything should push us to follow a policy of world citizens by maintaining relations based on respect, confidence, and cooperation with all nations. To conclude, I would like to let General de Gaulle speak. I recently received the last issue of the magazine Espoir of the Charles de Gaulle Foundation, and I came across this sentence which I found really excellent to conclude my remarks. Speaking to young academics in Mexico in March 1964, General de Gaulle, he used the first person to give a philosophical and political message. I just will quote the beginning of his message, but I think each word is important. And you know that General de Gaulle was a very great writer, and for him words were very important. This is what he said. Indeed, in 1964, indeed, beyond the distances which are getting shorter, the ideologies that are getting weaker, the political people who are running out of air, and unless humanity destroys itself one day in monstrous destructions, the fact that will dominate the future is the unity of our universe, one cause, that of man. One necessity, that of worldwide progress, and therefore of help to all countries who wish it for their development. One duty, that of peace, are, for our species, the very conditions of his life. I thank you very much.